It's the Fellowship of the Geek Show, a weekly podcast about comics, the comic book industry, and other geek pop culture. Music courtesy of Manny the Martyr. And now, on with the show! Hey there, everybody. It's the Fellowship of the Geeks podcast. My name is Thomas Chick, and joining me for this episode is Mike Marlowe.
Hey, gang.
Les Webster.
Hello, all.
And Liz Newman.
Hello, everybody.
How are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Just great.
Griff.
Haven't heard that one in a while.
Yeah. Hope everybody out there's doing great. So what's been going on in your corner of the galaxy?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm still... I feel like I'm going to be copping out for the next 6 weeks by saying I'm still getting ready for October, but like this week I actually kind of am. I was finishing up some reading and watching another movie. I'm going to be watching movies a lot for a while. That's part of the kicker of this, is that's going to tie me up. And I mean, I don't want to go too spoilery yet. I think we should. I don't know how long we're going to hold off before all that, but I'm also fiddling around with some other prospects in that regard, which I may talk about a little bit later. So there's heavy in the planning at this point and preparation.
So you said this week you really were. So did you lie to us last week and you really weren't?
No, I was last week too, but there things are developing that I'm not quite prepared to talk about yet. But
cool.
October's going to be fun. The horror stuff is going to be fun.
Yeah, I just had to mess with you. Les gets lonely under that bus by himself.
Uh-huh.
So, elephant in the room. Did anybody read The Batman this week?
No.
No? Oh my God. Okay,
but it was all over social media, so
totally all over social media. And I won't get into too many spoilers, but I'll just remind people of what I said when Carl died on The Walking Dead. When you take somebody's moral compass away, they're no longer the same person. So I'm very, very curious on where Batman goes from here. Bane hasn't even touched him, and he's broke him. You know, hand him the crown now. He did it. You know. So, yeah. And I won't say this often, so quote me on this, but hats off to King. I see now where his story was going, and it was kind of a, wow, you take everything that he's been through, and it's just really, wow. Maybe next week we'll discuss it a little bit more, but I think if people didn't already hate Damian, they are going to now. You know, so. But I also found out something interesting this week, and I'm kind of embarrassed to even admit it.
Ooh, one of those.
One of these. You know, I watch kids all day long. And we always turn the channel on to Disney Junior, because like I said, they're under 3 years old. And they've really gotten into this show called Puppy Dog Pals. And every time this show comes on, I hear this guy's voice, and I'm like, oh my God, where do I know this voice from? But he can't be anybody I know, right? Because this is a kid's show. It's a dog show. So curiosity finally got the best of me, and I go to look it up, and it's Harland Williams, the guy from Half Baked. So it's kind of like, duh. Well, he voices Bob, the dog's owners, on this show. And when you listen to some of the things that he had to say about this show, it's just absolutely adorable. they asked him why it had to be pugs, because he rescues. He's in the rescue world a lot too, but he has a Chihuahua and another little dog that's a little rare breed and everything else. They're like, well, why don't we do Chihuahuas? And he's like, no, these dogs have to be pugs. Pugs are so ugly that they're cute. And then you slap the Disney eyes on them. He's like, man, people won't be able to, resist these guys. So he made the show of pugs. But it's kind of cute. Like I said, it is a kid's show. And when I found out he did it, I don't feel so bad enjoying it because it's funny. Kind of like we've talked about with SpongeBob and stuff. Some of the jokes are kind of where the parents are like, I see what you did there. But it's kind of cute because they're puppies. And so everything is like through the eyes of a 3-year-old, The Mona Lisa goes missing, so a great painting has to go on a great wall. So they go to China's Great Wall to look for it. So it's just things like that. It's cute. It's something that, a kid would do. But now that I find out he's into it, like I said, it's just kind of a wow, Buttercup. What movie was that from?
Princess Bride?
No. So, but yeah, like I said, I was kind of the things you do when you're bored after watching TV for like 3 hours and you're finally like, who the hell are they watching? Let me look this up. Yeah, I said, I thought that was...
You want to be careful making any assumptions about voice actors because, man, there's a very wide and well, what's funny is that there's a lot of people doing it, and there are a handful of them that are really good and are like, it seems like they're in all the shows.
Yeah.
And so it's both kind of a tight knit group and a very kind of broad and diverse group at the same time. So yeah, what's
cool about him is him being a stand-up comic and stuff too. He's brought in people like Sherry O'Terry. Oh God, I can't remember the other guy's name, but he's had some really big names on here voicing, because they're like, we want to keep the funny aspect of it going. And he's like, the best way I know funny is what I do, and
right.
Stand-up.
The funniest people he knows are people he met doing stand-up, and and it's cool. It's good that he's involving other people.
Yeah,
other talent
unknown.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Plus, he teamed up with the guy who makes Mickey Mouse Clubhouse now, which like is crack to a baby and a child.
Well, sure.
So it's going to be a total success. It's already in its second season, I believe. So he found the formula and he's doing it right,
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
But anything that the kids can watch that I'm not sitting there tearing my hair out, I'm looking at you, Baby Shark. And then it's a good day, And it's one that I don't mind.
Right. Those are gems. You're
right.
You're doing great to find those.
Few and far in between, that's for sure.
Follow that up, Wes.
I always have to follow up. Well, I am in Oklahoma City this week to attend a surprise birthday party. And then also went to see my nephew play football. And thanks for bringing up Baby Shark, because I sat through 2 games, and there were more before that, and there were more after that. And I don't know how many times I heard them play Baby Shark.
Do 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 do.
Stop. Believe me, it was so bad. And I looked out, and some of the players were dancing to it, and I thought, you're 4th graders, you're 5th graders, you're 6th graders, stop it now. So, yes, I have heard Baby Shark, and I can actually say that it is this generation's Friday. Anybody who remembers that one.
Ooh, that's harsh criticism. Jeez.
So,
Yeah.
I just shiver.
And from what I understand, this is like an old song. It's not one that they just like made and came up with. It's been out for a while, so it's like,
Yeah, it's been
why
couple
couldn't
of
Baby
years.
Shark stay hidden?
It's been a couple of years because it's cute. That's
Oh
why.
man, the first time it's cute,
Yeah.
but the thousandth time when she's telling you, no, you got to do your hands like this. It's like, no, this ain't fun no more.
Right. This is not fun. This is choreography.
You realize
That's
it was
work.
a performance piece.
That's work.
But it is good to turn on and have her run around their living room for a couple hours and wear herself out.
There you go.
It just gets repetitive. Do-do-do-do-do.
It's not very long. That's part of the problem. Is that you can hear
No.
it. You can listen to it like 25 times in an hour.
It's too long. That's the problem. You got mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, run away, stay safe. It's the end. I mean, yeah, it's a whole song. Which now I'll be singing till I go to bed. Thanks, Les.
You bet.
Payback is hell, ain't it?
Strike back.
Les is driving the bus now.
I get to follow that.
Uh-huh.
Congrats.
I have nothing, so good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Be sure to tip your waitress.
Actually, I've been working on a few things that I can't reveal right now. Hopefully, the next week I might be able to give it more details of what's going on. I'm super excited about it. I think y'all guys are excited about this. Other people who are involved are excited. It's going to be, if this comes about, it could be really, really cool. But that's about all you're going to get right now. And unfortunately, I had some real world stuff going on. But I did finally get my copy of Forgotten All-Star, a biography of Gardner Fox. It's a book that we'll talk about a little bit before in the past, because the author, Jennifer DeRoss, had actually contacted us through Twitter because she had heard our episode on Gardner Fox that we did a while back.
Yeah, a few months back.
Yeah. So I have not had a chance to read this, but I've looked at it, and it looks like it's a really in-depth, informative book. So I can't wait to read it. I know it's gotten some high praise from those in the industry and fans who I've had discussions with on Twitter. So I'm very excited about reading it. Definitely try to pick up a copy if you're a fan of old school comics. And I mean, I'm not going to rehash what we did before, but if you're familiar with the name Gardner Fox, this is probably a book you would want to pick up and check out. So, before we get into this week's discussion, want to take a couple moments to talk about our upcoming Meet and Gab, which is Saturday, September 14th. And as usual, it's at Wing City, which is located at 1456 Beltline Road, Suite 120 in Garland. For those our fellow geeks who are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area would like to come out and hang out with us, have some good food, have some great conversations. We always have fun. We do every second Saturday of the month, and For more information, you can go to the website at www.thefellowshipofthegeeks.net and click on the Events tab, and there's all the information there. There's also a link to our event page on Facebook, so if you want to go check that out as well, by all means, and while you're there, go ahead and follow us on Facebook. These are always a blast, and we've been doing these since the start of the year, and it's always fun. So yeah, come hang out. That's Saturday, September 14th at 7 p.m. Wing City. All right, for this week, we were fortunate enough to have David Pepose on to discuss his new book, Going to the Chapel. And if that name sounds familiar to you, he is the creator and writer of Spencer and Locke, a book that we have talked about quite a bit on this show.
Ad nauseum.
Probably to the point where y'all are probably getting tired of hearing it. But if you picked up the book, you know it's worth talking about. It's a great, both volumes 1 and 2 are great reads and worth talking about. And his new book comes out this week, September 4th, at your local comic shop, and we were fortunate enough to get a advance copy to read, and like I said, we had him on to discuss not only Spencer and Locke of it Going to the Chapel, and then the writing process and everything else that's going on. So without further ado, our interview with David Pepose. We are here with David Pepose. Is that correct? Did I say it right?
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. The writer and creator of Spencer and Locke. Of course, if you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you know that we're big fans of this book. It's actually 2 volumes. The second volume trade here a few weeks. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And now coming this week is his new series, Going to the Chapel, from Action Lab Entertainment. It's actually the Action Lab Danger Zone, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
All right. And we are happy to have you here, David. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys so much for having me.
So, first of all, thank you for Spencer and Locke. That's both series were great reads. And go ahead, Mike.
I'll just say, yeah, we're big fans around here.
Yeah. Obviously, we did a casting call, which you seem to enjoy, and thank you for that.
I did. Especially, calling for Bryan Cranston to play Spencer. I'd be all on board for that for sure. I've got fingers crossed. We're still working hard on bringing our boys to the screen, and hearing those kind of casting calls, they always make my day.
Well, that's cool. Now, remind me, is it supposed to be for big screen, or is it supposed to be streaming service, or is it kind of up in the air right now?
All will be revealed soon.
Oh, okay. Stay tuned. There you go.
It's one of those things. We've got some cool stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm hoping we'll be able to talk about in more detail sooner rather than later. There are certain announcements that are not my place to break, and so we have to go through kind of the proper channels to talk to all the right people and say, do you guys want to sort of pull the trigger on this? But yes, so suffice to say, we've had some very cool movement over the last few weeks, or I guess the last couple of months, I guess I should say at this point. But yes, some very cool stuff that hopefully we'll be able to disclose sooner rather than later.
Cool. We can't wait.
Exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, all I'll say is I signed some paperwork on something really cool right around San Diego Comic-Con, and just waiting for the moment that I can actually talk about it.
And it's killing you that you can't talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
I can imagine that I can imagine. Let's say that.
It's yes. It hurts to bite my tongue this much. Suffice to say, fans of Spencer and Locke should keep their ears to the ground because we'll have some cool stuff to talk about, hopefully very soon.
Awesome. So how did the idea of Spencer and Locke come about?
Sure. Well, Spencer and Locke was an interesting book in that I got my start in the industry. I was an intern at DC Comics during Final Crisis and Batman R.I.P. and Green Lantern Secret Origin. But for those who have a calendar, that was also right when the recession started. So there were no jobs at DC Comics, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted in the industry. And I was fortunate enough that I met Janelle Asselin, who was an assistant editor at the Batman offices, and she had gotten her start as a reviewer at Newsarama. So that was kind of my entree into the industry. I worked as a reviewer at Newsarama for about a decade. I actually wound up becoming the reviews editor after Troy Brownfield retired. He was my mentor. And for a while, I was reading comics, and I love reading comics, but the thing that they don't tell you about having to review comics is you often have to review books even if you don't like them. A site like Newsarama, people are going to look at you funny if you're not covering sort of the big new event books. Those can be kind of hit or miss. It's like being a kid in a candy store, but sometimes you have to eat candy that is rancid, that is rancid, and you still have to eat it. So, there was a period in time, I guess it was around 2014, I was reading a lot of books that I wasn't connecting with. It was kind of the downswing of the New 52, and I think there weren't a lot of books at Marvel or Image that I was really kind of, jazzed on. And that's when I kind of had this thought of, if you're so smart, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and make a comic of your own? And I thought a lot about that. People talk about write what you know, and the problem is that I felt like I didn't really know anything except for comics. And that's when I kind of the light bulb idea went off, where I'm a big fan of mashup music. Things like Nine Inch Nails meets Call Me Maybe, two very different tastes, and you throw them together, and sometimes it works out into something strange and beautiful. And I thought nobody had ever tried that with comics. So I'm a big fan of old school Frank Miller, things like Dark Knight Returns, Year One, his Daredevil, The Man Without Fear with John Romita Jr. That book, as a kid, that was the book that made me realize that real writers made comics. They weren't sort of, made by committee, and like a greeting card or anything like that. And so I thought, what would be the weirdest thing to throw up against old school Frank Miller? The problem is that a lot of the ideas that I initially came up with, they felt very shock for shock value's sake. And I was just on a panel with Matt Rosenberg at Fan Expo Boston, and he really, I think, said it beautifully in that, you can get anybody in a first issue just based on the concept. But if you don't have any substance, they won't stick around for an issue 2. And it wasn't until I thought about Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes that I suddenly felt like I had an idea that was a little bit more than just shock value. The idea of a grown man carrying a stuffed animal into crime scenes, that had a lot of questions for me. It's kind of like, what's his home life? What was his upbringing? And all the answers, they were like, maybe this isn't some sort of charming affectation. Maybe this is sort of a symptom of a more sinister pathology going on. And that's kind of how the first Spencer and Locke came into being. Sort of this idea of this kind of very damaged cop and his own sort of unorthodox coping method, his defense mechanism of navigating through the world. That was a really cool thing. It kind of really evoked some of my favorite detective stories, particularly Memento. That's one of my favorite movies, and sort of the idea of somebody having a disability or a mental illness and having to leverage that to navigate the world. Those are the kind of stories I really enjoy. So, that was sort of, the funny thing is we pitched Spencer and Locke to a lot of places, and every time that somebody would tell us no, it actually convinced me more and more that we should do this book. We actually had, I won't name names, but all I'll say is we had a top 5 publisher tell me that this was the best thing he'd never published. And I take that as a huge vote of confidence, to be honest. Yeah, it was one of those things that it started off as a little bit of a dare to myself. And then as I kind of kept tiptoeing further and further along with it, I felt more and more convinced that this was a book that had to happen. And then eventually Action Lab suddenly said, yeah, we love this. When do you think you could have it done? And that's when that like cold chill ran down my spine. Where I was like, I got to write this book now. We have to actually finish this book. Oh God. And at the time, I know me and artist Jorge Santiago Jr. and the rest of our creative team, colorist Jason Smith, letterer Colin Bell, our variant artists Mon House and Joe Mulvey. I think we all were kind of like, well, we better just swing for the fences because this book is either going to succeed really, really well or it's going to just like go full Hindenburg. There's really no middle ground for this. And whether we succeed or whether we fail, it's going to be loud. So I am very thankful that people responded to the book, and I think that's a testament to how talented my creative team is on this. And that kind of led to our sequel, which just wrapped up last month. And knock on wood, hopefully some more stories down the line.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I did see something on Twitter, a tease about, or someone was asking about a volume 3, and you kind of,
I would know. All I'll say is, we've got ideas, and I can say that based on the way our sales have been so far, I'm feeling pretty confident that there might be a third volume. But I can neither confirm or deny at this time. Maybe around New York Comic Con, maybe there'll be some news, who knows? Suffice to say, I can say that as far as the ideas that I have in store for the book, for any potential sequels, all I'd say is the next story, there's a lot of moving pieces to it. And so the way I tend to work is I try to look at all the pieces I can and figure out what can I cut, what can I get away with cutting. So it's a lot to juggle. So it may, if a third volume comes, it may take a little while. But just like the gap between volumes 1 and volume 2, we want to make sure a book like this especially, it's risky material, it's flammable material. We want to make sure that we tell it right. And I think that when fans read what we have in store, they'll know that, I hope that they feel like it's worth the wait.
Yep.
Hopefully that wasn't too ominous or vague.
Just more tongue biting. I understand.
Suffice to say, I've already told Jorge and Action Lab what I would do for a volume 3, and we're saving some. We've saved sort of the best comic strips for last.
Cool.
So yes, speculators, start your engines.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go ahead and talk about your new book then. Since we're having to wait for volume 3, let's talk about Going to the Chapel.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this book. Going to the Chapel has been kind of a labor of love that's been a long time coming. I actually started writing this book after Spencer and Locke Volume 1. And, just based on sort of how comic book production schedules turn out, because we already had a team in place for Spencer and Locke, we figured the best move would be to, do Spencer and Locke 2 first. And Chapel, we finished production on that shortly thereafter. For those who aren't familiar with the series, Going to the Chapel is about a story about a bride with cold feet who winds up becoming the ringleader of her own hostage situation to get out of walking down the aisle. It's a little like if Die Hard got hitched to Wedding Crashers, or if Quentin Tarantino had a baby with Arrested Development and then chose to bring that baby to a wedding. It's a fun story. It's kind of our unique twist on a romantic comedy. It stars, like I said, a bride with cold feet her dysfunctional family, as well as a gang of Elvis-themed bank robbers who think it would be much easier to rob weddings than it would be to rob banks, and they're going to quickly find out just how wrong they are.
Yes, I did like that. Go ahead, Mike.
They kind of picked the wrong wedding.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I love about heist stories in general is that there's always layers to the heist, and there's always complications. And as readers are going to find out, even in the first issue, not everything is as it seems. Emily Anderson, she comes from a wealthy family, and her father has pulled some strings to get a priceless sapphire necklace known as the Heart of Dresden brought in from Paris on loan for this event. And the Bad Elvis gang, our group of criminals, they say, oh, well, this would be like an easy smash and grab. And unfortunately, based on Emily's cold feet, as well as some ulterior motives from some of the bank robbers, this simple plan does not go as simply as it should have. And so it winds up sort of spiraling into a full-on face-off with the police. And that's when things really get interesting. I think everybody can relate to having dysfunctional families. Being locked in a church with them for 15 hours, the masks start to slip. People start getting very real, very weird, very fast. And sort of that juxtaposition of this sort of fun, stylish action alongside some very super weird, super dysfunctional like family comedy. That's kind of a fun mix, I think, and I think it's something that everybody can find something to relate to there.
Yeah, definitely a fun read.
Thank you.
As a fan of heist, crime, that type of title, I want to say I was hooked.
Oh, thank you.
Just in the very first page when your female lead starts talking to herself. I saw the title of the book. I read that page, and I said, this is going to be fun. This is going to be interesting. She's going to be major in this.
It's true. This is very much Emily's story. I felt like it was really important. I think pop culture, first off, I think rom-coms get a bad rap. Just in general. I think both in the direct market and in pop culture as a whole, I think there's a lot of preconceptions on who's allowed to consume them. I think a lot of guys think that it's sort of a challenge to their masculinity. So they're like, oh, I can't watch a rom-com. And I think a lot of women are afraid of seeming kind of shallow or less intelligent for enjoying rom-coms. And I feel like it couldn't be further from the truth. There's things like 500 Days of Summer, there's About Time, there's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, just to name a few. So I've always felt that romance has just as flexible of a genre as sci-fi or crime or superheroes. And the reason I mention this is I feel like, in particular, the idea of fear of commitment is something that in pop culture is usually seen as a man's issue. Guys don't want to be tied down. You got to pull that groom all the way to the thing, to the altar. And I felt like having a female lead experiencing this, I think, was really important. I think it's sort of an emotional arc that you don't usually see in pop culture. And I think on top of that, for me, a lot of the action heroes that have really resonated with me, the most enduring ones, I think, have all been women. You think of Sarah Connor, you think of Ellen Ripley, you think of Laurie Strode. Those characters have stood the test of time. And so, people ask me a lot, does it feel different writing with a female lead? And I usually tell them, actually, most of my scripts up to this point have had female leads in mind. It was just kind of a fluke that Spencer and Locke happened to be the first thing that got published. I guess I attribute that. I've had a lot of really badass women in my life. My mother is kind of she's the bulldog in our family. All 5 feet of her. And going down to my girlfriend, who is she's kind of my editor in a lot of ways. She's sort of my first read on everything. She's sort of the sounding board where I bounce all of my stories off of. She's the person who kind of convinced me to start writing in the first place. So I think having characters that I think these strong female role models that I've had growing up, I kind of want to write stories that they would appreciate. And so having Emily as our lead in sort of this unlikely hostage ringleader, I feel like the story couldn't have been told in any other way.
Yeah, I have to agree with Les. Honestly, and this is a testament to your creative team again. The look on Emily's face on that first page, I was just like, okay, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be interesting. I can't wait to see how she's gonna react to this.
It was one of those things. Emily's fear kind of drives a lot of the story. It didn't occur to me until recently that so much of going to the chapel is about communication, or lack thereof. And I think a big influence I had on this book was just kind of a lot of old time, stage plays. Sort of those farces where things spiral out of control based on miscommunication, and sort of somebody walks out and the other person didn't know they were there, or somebody overhears just the wrong bit of somebody else's dialogue, and so they take things the wrong way. Sort of these misconnections and these sort of crossed signals. That's kind of fun. That's like a fun playground, I think, dramatically speaking. And so, yeah, seeing Emily kind of quietly freaking out, and seeing her fiance, Jesse, not recognizing any of these sort of neon flashing signs of, oh God, I'm terrified. That's kind of fun in a way. And I think the thing that I like the most about going to the chapel is I kind of wanted to write a story without villains, in a way. I wanted to write a story that, I guess with the exception of Walt, the sheriff, everybody here is pretty sympathetic. And I think even Walt, when you kind of look at him on paper, you're like, okay, he does what he does. He's a sheriff. He's got to maintain law and order. He's got to get these people out of this hostage situation. And but I think the interplay between Emily and our two romantic leads, Jesse and Tom, that's kind of the dynamic that keeps the engine of our story moving, and it keeps going to the chapel, getting more. The hostage situation is only going to get more complicated as the pressure's on.
So like real life, then, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys are married, but I'm sure you at least had one bank robber show up. That's
right.
Good.
Man, at my wedding, I wouldn't have noticed. Honestly, I was so there. It was that was an interesting day, to say the least.
I kind of remember that day.
I'm glad one of us does. There was no alcohol involved at all either. I just was so locked into follow the plan, do the plan, go exactly with the plan. I wasn't paying attention to anything around me.
Well, it makes me think of I was the best man at a wedding, and that was actually kind of one of the big inspirations behind going to the chapel. Was one of my oldest friends. I've known him my entire life. We were born 3 weeks apart. Our fathers have been friends longer than we've been alive. So my friend calls me and he goes, "Hey, I'm getting married to my longtime high school, college sweetheart, and so I want you to be the best man." The problem is that I was living in Los Angeles and he was living in North Carolina at the time. So we could not have been further apart. So I'm the idiot who tries to plan a bachelor party on the wrong side of the country. And as you can probably guess, it was the world's worst bachelor party. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I had the Airbnb that I had reserved was completely trashed. I had rented an inflatable sumo suit set for the backyard, not knowing that the backyard was at a 45-degree angle. The groomsmen bailed about 48 hours before the event was supposed to start. They decided they didn't want to pay anymore. And then the cherry on top was I wound up going to the hospital with a kidney stone shortly before the event, and so I actually had to miss this bachelor party that I had planned. I had to everything in the country on pain. So I was kind of thinking at the time, wow, this is the bachelor party from hell. It happened during the wedding. And then I thought, but what if it did? And that was kind of the genesis of going to the chapel in a lot of ways. I had thought at first, the worst thing that could happen at this wedding would be if, the parents of the bride had hired some leg breakers to convince my friend to call off. And then I was like, no, that's not the worst thing that could happen at all. The worst thing that could happen is if his fiance suddenly got cold feet. She started having thoughts. And that kind of made me realize, like, oh, there's a really kind of dramatic, emotional arc at play here. Because, the words "till death do you part," those are big words. That's a big promise you're making. Mm-hmm. Statistically, people roll the dice all the time and it doesn't work out for them. So, I feel like pop culture in a lot of ways treats love as a destination rather than a journey. And we wanted to kind of explore that journey in going to the chapel. Journeys sometimes have detours. Sometimes they have full-on swerves. Sometimes they're just bank robbers robbing your wedding. Being able to sort of track romance and sort of follow that evolution and sort of, tease it out a little bit and just show that, like, love is not always as simple as pop culture makes it out to be. It can be a very complex emotion. And being able to explore that, I think, is kind of one of my favorite parts of this series as a whole. And I have my friend to thank for that. So I've told him that I can't give him a cut of this book, but I can't.
That's what dedication pages are for, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, they're expecting their first child now. So I told them I would get them a copy of the trade paperback as a baby warming gift. So
there you go.
Aww.
Let's see if I get invited back there again, or if they ask Godfather. We'll see.
You mentioned marriage and everybody got quiet.
I wonder why. Because as unlikely as it may seem, our spouses may listen to this someday.
Mine tried. I'll give him A for effort. He tried. And he's like, yeah, when that dude started talking about a robot turning into a princess, I was lost. I was like, wait, what? Come to find out, I think it was one of your picks, Mike. It's like I was lost. I tried.
It's funny you say that, though, because I feel like, for me, like, sort of, my relationship with my partner, and I'm sure people will always sort of point the finger at me when I say I'm not married yet. But there was a time in a previous relationship where I almost was, and I kind of had to go through that same process that Emily did, in a way, sort of thinking like, am I going to go through with this or am I not? And there was no rings exchanged or proposals exchanged, but it was one of those things that we were at that stage in our lives and we had dated long enough that people sort of were thinking like, it felt very much sort of, you need to crap or get off the pot. And I was too young at the time. And it was, but it was a very kind of agonizing decision at that point. But, the reason why I was thinking about what you were just saying is, my partner right now, she's very supportive about this. And, she's sort of my first reader in terms of comics. And I like the fact that she's not a diehard comics person, because for me, comics in these days, and I think it's something that's happened for a long time, they can often lean towards spectacle and high concept over kind of like an emotional core, something that that will resonate with you. And so, my girlfriend, she wasn't a comics reader growing up, and I find that very valuable to me as a writer and as a creator, because I can always say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Does this make any sense to you? Does this resonate with you in any way? And usually she's got a pretty good radar in terms of, oh yeah, like that sounds awesome. Like I can definitely vibe with that. Versus, yeah, I don't get it. Like that's too esoteric. Like it doesn't make any sense to me. I have no resonance with this. And so I kind of trust her instincts pretty well. Because yeah, I think, I call it the girlfriend test, or if I want to tweak her a little bit, I call it the grandma test. Can you tell the story? Can you sum up your story and describe it to your grandmother in a way that she will say, she'll say something other than, oh, that's nice. If you can actually tell a high concept that'll engage your grandparent or your significant other or your parent or whatever civilian you want to talk to, that means it's accessible enough and universal enough that it's ready for prime time. If you can't boil it down that way, either you're selling it wrong, in which case think it over in a way that's a little simpler, or chances are it's too complicated for its own good and you need to streamline. And, it's always heartbreaking when that happens. I've certainly had plenty of stories that have sort of been, I've sent to the graveyard because they've been too complicated. And maybe I'll exhume them someday, but sort of that idea of having a sounding board that you can say, do I sound like a lunatic when I say do I sound like a crazy person? And if the answer is no, then I'm like, okay, this is a story that's got some leg. Maybe I'll develop it a little further. So thanks, Grandma.
See, I'd be in trouble because he'd always be like, yes, you sound crazy.
See, but it's those preconceived biases that can be dangerous, and it's good when you can find a reader that doesn't have those, either about the subject matter or about you as a writer or a person, or the medium that you're using to write it in. I mean, to have a reader that doesn't have the preconceived notions about how comics should work, that's valuable.
And
it is.
So much of it is, and maybe it's blasphemy for me to say this, but at the end of the day, the story is the story is the story. And the medium is how you execute that story. I feel like I write comics because that's the medium that I write best in. And it's not to say that, I've written screenplays and I've written teleplays, and they're all very different animals. I like comics because every page to me is kind of like an equation that I have to solve. And you only get 20 pages or 22 pages to tell a specific chunk of your story, and you only get a certain number of issues to tell the whole thing. So I feel like for me, I'm always trying to just, when I'm bouncing ideas off people, it's what's the story? Because the execution, that's sort of that's a trial and error. You kind of tinker with it until it works. And thankfully, I've been pretty fortunate in that I tend to be able to pace myself decently well, that I can kind of say, all right, I know how much can fit structurally into one issue, but what do I fit in that issue? Like what's the right story here? And I think story's universal. And yeah, you're absolutely right that there's a lot of preconceptions, especially about genre. And I feel like that's always kind of like that's the tough thing. And I think I have no illusions. Go into the chapel. That's exactly sort of what I'm asking readers to do. I'm asking them to take a leap of faith on me, based on sort of what they've read in the first two volumes of Spencer and Walk. Rom-coms get a bad rap, like we were talking about earlier. And this is very much sort of the epitome of direct market counter programming. We are going extremely against the grain here. By saying, like, do you like Quentin Tarantino? Do you like Arrested Development? Do you like Wedding Crashers or The Hangover or Bridesmaids? Do you just like Julia Roberts or Meg Ryan? If you can say yes to any of these, you're going to love this book. It's just, it's the kind of book that I think we need to see more of in the direct market. And I think it's to combat some of the preconceptions that you were talking about, where if somebody feels very intimidated about, a robot princess, which I don't know why. Robots should have princesses just like everybody else.
Right.
Why not? Sure.
But if somebody feels intimidated by that, you can say, well, do you like romance? If you ever read a romance novel, if so, slide them a copy of Going to the Chapel. Or if you say, hey, you like crime fiction, slide them a copy of Going to the Chapel. For me, I always want to write books that bring people to the table. I want to widen the consensus. It's no secret that, comics as an industry, despite all the attention that we're getting in the multimedia sphere, a lot of the bar for accessibility for just print comics, whether they're floppies or trades or however you want to divvy them up, it's still pretty high. And so that's why I want to tell stories like Going to the Chapel or Spencer and Locke, where you don't have to know anything about genre conventions to read my books. You don't have to have a deep encyclopedic knowledge of comic strips or comic books. I mean, to be honest, anybody beyond a certain age, even the younger kids who did not read Calvin and Hobbes as strips, either their parents have the books or they've seen the stickers of the kid peeing on a Ford symbol on a car. I can't tell you how many times I have to say, like, oh, have you seen that sticker? And then their eyes light up.
Sadly enough, yes.
But it's trying to combat that feeling of intimidation, that feeling of, oh, do I have to do a lot of homework to get involved in this? We see the Marvel movies making $1 billion, and it's because the stories are not tied. They're inspired by comic book continuity, but they are not tied down by it. And they are, for the most part, telling stories that have some sort of human core in it. Even if it's a story about a big purple grimace dude collecting magic rocks. You still vote for Thanos, by the end of the movie. And that's kind of the thing that I want to do with my stories, is I want to make you feel something. I'd like to make you laugh. I'd settle for making you cry. I think for me, apathy is the only bad response. I just want people to feel something, one way or the other. Honestly, even if they hated it, I would much rather somebody hate my book than feel nothing over it. If they're not feeling something over it, then I'm not doing my job.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. I feel like these comics are hard enough to make. If you don't feel something on the other end, then what am I even doing here?
Right, then what's the point? Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot of product out there, and product is kind of like the snarkiest word I can use. I still talk with my Newsarama friends, and we will use that word very derisively, because I get it. They're sometimes there's use for product. Event tie-in books, they're usually kind of product. It's sort of variations on whatever the main event title is supposed to be. So if somebody loves Absolute Carnage, like I do, I love Absolute Carnage, Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman, killing it. Then maybe you'll like, Cullen Bunn, doing, a mini series on Scream, I think is the symbiote's name, and then doing another, there's another miniseries, Lethal Protectors, and there's another one starring Miles Morales, and none of those books are going to reinvent the wheel. Nobody's really expecting them to. It'd be kind of unfair to demand that they do. They're just, one of them's vanilla ice cream, and another one's vanilla ice cream with chocolate chips, and another one's vanilla ice cream with peanut butter cups, another one's vanilla ice cream with brownie bits, and it's fine. Some people just love having vanilla ice cream with a bunch of random stuff in it. It's totally cool. But I do feel like there are a lot of books out there that, they'll try to rest on the hype concept, and then they won't know what to do with issue 2. Or they will write a first issue where the high concept doesn't even get introduced until the very last page of the book. That always kills me. It's those sorts of things that always bug me as a reader. And I always want to make sure that people who read my books, every issue they feel like they've gotten something out of it. That we've at least demonstrated enough of the central concept that people feel invested and they feel like I haven't, stolen money out of their pockets. And,
right.
Just because I'm writing about bank robbers doesn't mean I need to be robbing them. And so I think the difference between product and narrative, a strong narrative, is just, did I make you feel anything? And if the answer is no, then, feel free to browbeat me at whatever convention you're at, because I clearly deserve it.
Right. Although I do have to wonder kind of what your beef against Dairy Queen blizzards is, but that's probably a different conversation.
Listen, my thought is I got no problem with blizzards. I love blizzards. I only need one blizzard. It's the people who need like 16 different blizzards at the same time that I'm like, you might have a problem. I'm not here to judge, and you know what? Like, at the same time, those are the same people that if they're buying 16 blizzards, maybe they'll buy my special custard too. So I can't knock anybody for it, but I would hate for anyone to feel bamboozled by my books, and so if I ever am lucky enough to be writing an event tie-in, I hope that I get enough wiggle room to at least make it feel like something other than just super bland.
Right. You want to do something interesting with it.
Yeah, exactly. Life's too short to be writing garbage.
Well, there's a soundbite if I ever heard one.
No offense to anybody I'm not saying that all event tie-ins are garbage, I swear. But there are books that I'm sure you've read them that you feel like, oh, that's kind of a waste. And, listen, if it's a book that somebody's taken a big swing and it just doesn't work out, I got no beef with them. I would much rather somebody do something super risky and it totally blow up in their faces. And, the bigger you go on sort of that ladder, there are a lot of moving parts and there are a lot of things that can get messed up. And that's, I guess, my roundabout way of saying that's why I really like the creator-owned sphere, particularly the work I've been doing with Action Lab, is that I tell stories on my own terms, and I pick my creative teams, and I recruit them specifically so I can get sort of the best bang for the reader's buck in terms of the content. And, I also don't have to be hitting any major corporations' quarterly schedules, to hit their quarterly earnings benchmarks, and that's totally fine. I would much rather spend my time at this juncture just telling the best stories I can, and just having a catalog that will make me earn my place in the major leagues. I don't ever want to be that kind of writer who thinks they can run before they walk. I'm all about putting in my dues and earning my place, and also writing for the big two or writing any licensed books, it's its own set of challenges, its own set of muscles, and I want to make sure that I am ready for it. So, because I'm sure if you talk to any writers out there, they would say, I don't want to put out product, I don't want to put out anything meaningless, and I'm sure sometimes it's just the way that the calendar crumbles, and it's easy for me to say that when I'm writing creator-owned books. But that's why I like working in the creator-owned sphere, is that I don't put myself in a position where anybody can go out and say, oh, David was just BSing us and that was just total nonsense. Every book that I'm writing right now comes from a place in my heart, and it's something that if I don't feel 100% confident in it, I can't expect you to. So that's sort of my litmus test for anything that I choose to pursue to write right now.
Right. There's a certain. It's important to be able to kind of take some pride in your work and feel like you're saying something.
Yeah, and I do a lot of conventions, and I hand sell a lot of copies of my books. And I feel like if I didn't feel like me and every member of my creative team wasn't putting 150% into it, people say, "Oh, have you ever worked in sales?" I'm like, "No, I'd be terrible at it because I can't sell anything I don't believe in." But that's sort of my goal, and so far I've been hitting it. Is that everything I've written, I believe in it. And that might speak to sort of the quality of the art teams that I'm working with, is that they're so talented that I'm like, oh, it doesn't really matter what I wrote. Like, they're just so talented. But yeah, I think my goal is I always want to write something I believe in. Because at the end of the day, I'm asking a lot out of readers to take a chance on me, and I want to make sure that chance pays off.
Well, I just wanted to say I enjoyed the first issue of the chapter, and I have high. I think it's going to be a great read the rest of the way. I think it's, Mike and Les talked about the opening page, and that was great. But right there at the end, where it was revealed,
where it twisted,
where things got a little twisted, where kind of the shock came in, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. This is going to be really fun. This is going to, it was interesting before, but now we just introduced a new dynamic, and I was going, okay,
yeah. Which left me so many questions. It's like I can't even wait until issue 2.
I appreciate you saying that. There's a nice twist that we threw in at the last issue, or threw in at the end of the first issue. I've been kind of biting my tongue not talking about it. I always say, first issues are tough because you have to introduce all of your characters, you have to introduce your high concept, you have to try to get a little bit of forward movement in your story. It's sort of, it's all that exposition. It's kind of like eating your vegetables first. And so I'm the type that, like, okay, if I'm going to make you eat vegetables, I'm going to at least dunk them in like cheese or something, so you feel like there's something else. And so, introducing a bunch of characters who are super weird and like super funny at like the outset. I'm glad that you're saying all this stuff because, once we've got all the characters in the chapel in issue 1, I always say issue 1's our slowest issue because, we are establishing everything. And I think we get just far enough that nobody's going to feel like disappointed with what we've done. But once all the players are in place, this is a 4-issue mini, but we are like putting pedal to the metal. It's so much fun. Not only having like 15 speaking characters locked in one place, although that was kind of a fun challenge in and of itself. But we've been able to take all the different kind of all that wedding imagery, all those accessories and all those decorations and all those kinds of angles that you have for a chapel, and kind of weaponize them in a way, and that's kind of like when people ask me like what my job is like, I'm like, well, I have to look at a wedding registry and decide what can you turn into a weapon. That's kind of like my life. And so, yeah, there's so many like really cool things that there's a lot of cool twists that we're putting on this book, and I'm really, really excited about. And I can say that if people read issue 1 and they like what they're reading, they're going to love the rest of this series. Things are they're gonna spiral in kind of a wild and crazy way. And watching Emily kind of navigate both the bad Elvis gang, her own dysfunctional family, the cops outside, that's kind of it's a little bit of a pressure cooker. And seeing the ways that she responds to these challenges, it's in some very funny and some action-packed ways.
Pretty cool. And I also learned I would be the type of heist person that if somebody goes, oh, you don't want this means nothing, I want it. Give it to me. Take it off. I don't care. Give it to me.
Yeah, I was going to say. Well,
so I learned a good lesson in heisting.
Never underestimate grandmas. That's what I always say. You know, and I will say we've got such a fun, kind of colorful cast for this. You know, I'm a big fan of the movie Dog Day Afternoon, which a lot of people probably haven't seen it, but it's a movie about bank robbers, and it turns into a hostage situation, and seeing them play off their hostages, which they wind up kind of almost befriending in a sort of way. There's like a weird dysfunctional relationship between these bank robbers and their hostages. And that was something that I really liked, that dynamic a lot, of something I wanted to emulate in this book. But you've got, you know, Emily's family are super weird. Kind of like if the Bluth family from Arrested Development got caught in a bank robbery, how might they react? It'd be probably similar to this book. And seeing their evolving dynamic with the Bad Elvis gang, it's kind of fun. You know, we'll have some preview pages out for this relatively soon, so I probably can talk about this. But like, you know, for example, you know, like what happens when one of the Bad Elvises like realizes, oh, that flower girl's a pyromaniac? They might actually just wind up eating it off. So you know, it's those sorts of like fun little character beats of seeing the line between criminal and hostage, watching those kind of blur a little uncomfortably. That's like, I think, a really fun dynamic of our book.
Yeah, I think Grandma's going to be a hoot.
Yes. If 2018 and 2019 were the years of us getting Spencer and Locke cosplayers, I'm hoping 2019 and 2020 we'll have some Grandma Harriet cosplayers, you know, so fingers crossed. Okay, it's super easy. Just bring your grandma over to my table. I'll give you some free stuff. You're here to hear first, folks.
Yeah, there's the challenge.
Grandma to my booth challenge.
Well, challenge accepted then. I'm sure I've got some old enough.
Just when I thought I wouldn't be more uncomfortable than people in furry suits. This is a joke challenge, guys. You do not have to bring your grandmas. But if anybody does cosplay as Grandma Harriet, I'll give them some free stuff. Definitely no problem. Rock that up.
So you said you do the cons a lot. Have you run across a lot of crazies, or have people been pretty open and receptive? Or
I mean, you know, conventions. I mean, I love going to cons. I do. I think I'm up to something like 12 or 13 or 14 this year. And I do them, you know, all over the country. And I think it's great, you know, getting to meet readers in different markets that I might not have met, you know, immediately. Like I said, I'm based in Los Angeles, so I meet a lot of people in California, but, you know, I just did Fan Expo Boston, for example. And that was a really wonderful, receptive show. And, you know, not all cons, of course, are created equal. You know, there are some shows where you learn pretty quickly that their customers are not really there for comics. And that's always a little disappointing. But, you know, I always think that it's worth it to take the shot and to, you know, see if people are interested. But, yeah, you know, I've been to a lot of shows where people are really cool and really excited to, you know, try our books. And, you know, Spencer and Locke has been a really wonderful seller. I think we've sold through something like 80% of our trade paperback print run already for the first volume.
Nice.
Just in, I guess, about 2 years. So we'll probably by sometime next year we'll already be doing another printing of it. Yeah, I mean, has there been crazy people? No, I you know, every so often, you know, of course we're in the comics industry. If you've never met an awkward person in the comics industry, that person's probably you. But you know, every so often, you know, you'll get somebody who will be so excited that they will try to hang out at your booth for 2 hours, and you know, that always is tricky to navigate. You never want readers to feel bad, but at the same time, you want to keep the churn going to make sales. For me, it's more, and I rarely have to deal with this. I think 99% of the people I chat with are really cool and like really receptive, and even if they don't pick up the book, they're always very friendly about it. There's the 1% of the people. I always try to say this, so this is my little bit of con etiquette to tell everybody is, please don't ask creators to haggle. That happens to me at least once a show, and it always kind of is a bummer for me. Unfortunately, I hate to be the one to tell this to people. Indie creators, we do not have the highest of margins for our books. I swear we're not getting our books for free. We still have to pay the distributor to get copies of our books. And so when people are like, hey, your $15 trade, could you sell it to me for 10? I'm like, ooh, that kind of kills my margin for that book, so I can't do that. I'm sorry. But
plus, it's your work that they're asking you to take a discount for.
Yeah. I always say my books are, they're cheaper than a movie ticket and they'll last you a whole lot longer. But I think beyond that, it's been really cool being at cons, and I think, especially shows like, just off the top of my head, I love Baltimore, I love Denver, Boston was fantastic, New York actually is a really good show. I really like that show a lot. Those shows, people, anybody who tells you they get into comics for the money is lying, either to you or themselves. And, I think we all do this for love of the game. I grew up reading comics, and it's nice going to conventions and seeing people that, even if they're not looking to be creators themselves, they still have that same fire. That they're gonna read comics till the day they die because they love comics. And even if it's a period where they're not really loving the comics they're buying, they're still there, they're still involved in the industry, just looking forward to the next big wave. And that's really inspiring to me as a creator. It's kind of one of the reasons why I like doing shows as much as I do. Sometimes I kind of joke that I'm like, it sucks that I have to actually write these things, because I would love just going on the road, all the meeting people and selling them books. And I think it speaks to a little bit of our earlier conversation that I believe wholeheartedly in the books that I'm working on. And, there's something to be said for selling something when you're a true believer. But it also is just, real talk, I'm a needy writer who has a hole in his soul, who would love to just get as much adoration as possible. And having strangers be like, yeah, I'll take a chance and buy that book. That's a great feeling. I'll never go back to an honest job again. Just because meeting people and being able to connect with total strangers just based on kind of a crazy idea you had in your head, that's great. That's great. Sure beats digging ditches.
Right.
Any final questions?
No, maybe when issue 2 comes out.
We haven't got the first issue out yet.
All right.
It comes out this week.
All I'll say
I gotta sneak at that one, though.
All I'll say is issue 2, once the Bad Elvis gang realizes the cops are right outside, they're going to try to figure out, okay, how can we spin this? And that's going to put Emily in a very unique position. She's going to have to choose her allegiances very carefully moving forward. And suffice to say, the police's first head-to-head with the Bad Elvis gang, I don't think it's going to go the way that anybody thinks.
Very cool.
Interesting.
If I may ask, do you plan to hit any of the cons in this area, either in Dallas or Houston or Austin or anything like that?
I would love to do a Texas show, and I'm trying to remember if I don't think the applications are available for Comic Palooza yet. I've heard good things about that show. I would love to do a Texas show. That's sort of on my bucket list, of markets I haven't hit and haven't tried yet. So, yes, I'm hoping for 2020 for sure.
If you want to talk to Jensen, he owns a bar in Austin.
Are you offering Are you offering for me to sleep under the bar? 'Cause I'll do it.
You'd have to move me first.
Yes, I would love to do a Texas show. I can say that by the time that this will go up, my convention schedule coming up. I'm doing Long Beach Comic Con at the end of August. I'm doing Rose City Comic Con in Portland in mid-September. I'm doing New York Comic Con at the beginning of October. I believe I'm doing LA Comic Con the following weekend, and then Baltimore Comic Con the following weekend. And that should, in theory, wrap up my convention schedule for 2019. If anybody invites me and wants to fly me out, I'll never say never.
I think I need to do some emails here. See if we can work something out.
Yeah. And I will say also, for any, listeners out there, first off, I'm sure many of you have heard this spiel before, but allow me to reiterate, is that, pre-orders, really make or break indie books like ours. And so you can still pre-order the issue 2 and 3 of Going to the Chapel. The pre-order codes for issue 2 are AUG for August, AUG 191482, AUG 191483, and AUG 191484. And the pre-order codes for issue 3 actually just dropped, and that is SEP for September, SEP 191367, SEP 191368, and SEP 191369. And pre-ordering books, it's a huge help, especially in the indie comics sphere. It shows your local comic shop that there is a demand for our book, and and it just tells my publisher that they want to do more projects with me. So every pre-order counts, and I don't charge for signatures at conventions. So if you buy the book, bring it over, and I will gladly sign it for you.
Very cool. And also, stalking your Twitter, you have a thing called Pep Talk.
Yes.
Where people can sign up and get information about your comics.
Yes. So, yes, it is a brand new newsletter. You can follow me on Twitter. It's just Pepose D. It's my last name and first initial. And yes, you can sign up for my new newsletter, Pep Talks. You can, the bit.ly link is just bit.ly or bit.ly/Pep News. Since Pep Talks was already taken. So you can follow that sort of for the latest news and behind the scenes. And you can also follow my books on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There's Spencer and Locke. It's just one word, all spelled out. And Go to the Chapel. And you can also follow my upcoming book, Grand Theft Astro, also on those 3 platforms. We haven't talked a whole lot about those books yet because we're still TBD in terms of when the book is going to be coming out, but it is almost completely written, and the artwork from artist Jordi Perez is terrific. So yes, stay tuned because hopefully we'll have more to talk about that soon.
Very cool.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. Well, we do thank you for joining us, David. Continued success. Hopefully, going to the chapel will be as successful as Spencer and Locke. And hopefully we'll have some follow up after this.
Absolutely.
Depending on how this ends. We don't.
I promise I won't break your hearts. This love story has a happy ending. I just won't tell you what it is yet. But thank you guys so much for having me, and thank you to all the listeners out there who are listening to this podcast, and for anyone who calls their local comic shop and pre-orders. You guys are real MVPs, so thank you guys for helping spread the word.
Thank you, David.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, David.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And we're back, and we are here for our time for our weekly picks. And leading off this week is Les.
Thank you, sir. My first choice is 5 Years Number 4 by Abstract Studios. I bring this one in because it is Terry Moore writing and illustrating. This is a book about several of Moore's characters, those that were established in previous books. And in this episode, there is a senator in Washington that is promoting the PHI bomb program. And Kachu, who was first seen in Strangers in Paradise, wishes to stop him and feels that the only way to stop him is with the Parker girls. Kachu steps out, finds 2 of the members of the Parker girls, and leads the group to take down this radical senator. Now, why I chose this is definitely the construct that Moore puts into his comics, into his stories. It's just a strong, very strong story with exquisite art. So I'm standing in line for this one.
Very cool.
Yep. It's on pretty much just nearly all of our pull lists, I'm sure.
Yep.
If not all.
If not all. Alrighty, Liz.
All right. For my first pick, it's actually a book I've told you guys about before. It's Battle Pug. Mike Norton does a webcomic with a barbarian and an oversized pug, and they save the world. It's cool. It's kick-ass. He bound all of his webcomic into a graphic novel, and I guess that was so well received because now he has his own comic book, and this will start off with our favorite barbarian and his overgrown dog again. So if you enjoyed it or you just enjoy dogs, I can tell you guys these are really cute stories. And yeah, I mean, have to pick this one up.
Cool.
Yep.
I'm down for a barbarian.
Battle Pug was great the first time, so this will be a good addition.
Yep.
Alrighty, Mike.
Okie dokie. So my first pick is from Image Comics, and we're finally getting back to Pretty Deadly. And I am super excited because this is the 3rd arc, and so they're redoing them. They're starting the numbering over, so it's Pretty Deadly number 1, but this is technically volume 3. And this is a book that I remember talking about the first 2 volumes, and I had a really hard time describing this book. And honestly, it's not any easier to describe now, but this is one of those books that if you appreciate comics as a medium, you will want to read this book. It borders on poetic. It's the kind of artistic book that it sets the bar for the genre or for the medium, and I start stumbling obviously over how to talk people into buying this book, but please go buy this book because it is beauty in words and pictures in ways that only people like I said, I get fumbly over it because it's both really hard to describe and just essentially so beautiful that it makes it difficult to describe anyway. So, go get it.
Cool. glad to see it back.
Yep.
Alrighty, I am next, and for my first choice, I'm going with a first of a 2-issue run from DC Comics entitled Legion of Superheroes Millennium. Yes, they are finally back. This is the first time we're going to see them all together since the post-rebirth world of DC Comics. This is written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by everybody under the sun. And the thing that's kind of interesting about this book is not only are they coming back, but apparently in this 2-issue little set, they're supposed to be explaining all the different versions of Legion that we have seen over years, and not only that, tie in the other futures that involve, say, like Batman Beyond and Commandy and some of these other books, which that would be something if he could do that, if he does that. So I'm definitely intrigued. I'm glad to see them back. I kind of like the new looks. There's some of them I really like. Some of them I'm just going, okay. But we'll give it a shot, because I'm glad to see that the Legion is back.
Cool.
That's a step forward.
Yep. Alrighty, Les.
My second choice comes from Titan Books. It is Ms. Tree, Volume 1. Written by Max Allan Collins, illustrated by Terry Beatty. Collins is top-notch writer. He's the man that gave you Road to Perdition. He has done television, movies, comics, novels, all sorts. They collected the series from the 80s of Ms. Tree, which was I want to say an 8-issue series or something like that. And in this, you have the main character, Ms. Tree, whose private detective husband was murdered by the Murta family. And obviously, she goes on a rampage. So you have so much good story here and some top-notch art with it. So this is one of the hard case crime books put out by Titan. And if you've read any of those, they are fabulous. So I'm going to say step up and try this one out.
Yeah, it's nice to see this back in print after a long period of time. Because I'm one of those who did not partake of this series back in the day. I've heard a lot of good things about it, so I definitely want to check this book out.
Yep, me too.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, Liz.
All right. For my second pick, it's out of Boom Studios. It's called Something is Killing the Children. Kids are going missing, and the ones that do make it back are telling me stories of like monsters in the shadows and stuff. And of course, adults being adults, they don't believe the kids. In walks Erica Slaughter. She believes the kids. She claims that she can see what they see and that pretty much she's the only one who can kill them. So the town's got to say, okay, is she the one killing the kids or is she going to help the kids? Kind of a hard choice to be in. So this one should be pretty interesting. James Tynion is writing this one, and I think we're going to get a really good story. But I have to throw in, when I was looking over this one and reading some of the reviews and everything else, there was a quote that came to mind by J.K. Chesterton, which he says that fairy tales don't tell children that dragons exist. They tell children that the dragons can be killed. And I think that quote pretty much sums up this book, that they know there's monsters. You ain't got to tell them there's no monsters. They just need to know that someone can kill these monsters, So it should be an interesting story. I'm excited about this one.
Yep, sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, that was on my list. So, yeah. Alrighty, Mike.
Okie dokie. So I have a second pick, and it is a Dark Horse book, and it is called Everything, and this is issue number 1. And so what Everything is it's a big, shiny new mega department store, which is opening up in a small town in Michigan. And maybe coincidentally, maybe not, there are some weird supernatural things starting to happen in this small town in Michigan. And obviously, it's not going to take long before people start to suspect the big, new, shiny department store, and the very strange manager that is running it. And so, this one has got, I mean, despite the obvious, almost cliched possibilities in this, it really sounds like there's a cool story in this, and I'm looking forward to checking it out.
That sounds cool.
I agree.
Alrighty, for my second choice, I pick another new title from Dark Horse Comics called Triage. And this is the story of a nurse named Evie Pierce who wakes up in a unfamiliar world along with 2 doppelgangers. One is a, quote, young and snarky superhero, unquote, and the other is a hardened rebel military commander of a post-apocalyptic world. And what happens is these 3 women are being hunted by someone, and they got to figure out what the hell's going on and how they're going to get out of this. I like the premise.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very unique one, so I'm kind of excited about this one.
Yeah, sounds pretty cool.
It does.
Alrighty, and our honorable mention this week is...
Well, we'd be crazy not to push Going to the Chapel one more time on you guys. It's a really fun book. I think David did a wonderful job of explaining what the story is. Like I said, if you like heist and romance and those kind of books where you think you know what's going on until you don't know what's going on, this is definitely the book for you. Very excited about this one. Like I said, we were fortunate enough to see a sneak peek, and we can really definitely say you guys will enjoy this one.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, any special shout-outs this week?
No.
No.
Other than to thank you to David for joining us once again.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Except for that one, of course.
Of course. Okay, we'll go ahead and do our regular shout-outs. Obviously, Pop Goes the Culture podcast network for allowing us to be part of such a fine group of fellow podcasters. I'm starting to have problems to talk now. Definitely check them out. We'll have a link in our show notes. Thank you guys for your support. And obviously the fine men and women who make up Pattern Family on Twitter. Thank you guys very much. We suggest you go check out their fine work, and the easiest way to do that is while you're on Twitter, just do a search, #PatternFamily, and just scroll through, and if something catches your attention, click on that link, download that episode, and knock yourself out. Thank you guys for your support as always. I want to thank Manny the Martyr for supplying the music to our podcast. We'll have a link to their music. They have a couple EPs out. Definitely, you you should check that out. And finally, you, dear listener, thank you for downloading and listening to today's episode. We truly value your support. We'd love to hear from you. Have a comment, question, suggestion, complaint, observation, whatever. Please, by all means, contact us. And there's several ways you can do that. Our email address is email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net, or you can go to the website and click on the About Us tab, and there's a contact form that you can fill out. You can also contact us through social media, but by all means, follow us. I've already talked about our Facebook page, Fellowship of the Geeks, and that's where you can see information for we have a Facebook event for our next meetup. And obviously we are on Twitter, and our tag is @FellowshipGeeks. Feel free to follow us there. If you'd like to follow our personal Twitter accounts, by all means. Mike can be found @MikeyGeek. Liz can be found @LN_geek. And I can be found @TomTCGeek. And wherever you download or listen to our episodes, we would be so happy if you would take a couple moments and rate and review our show. Anything else before we say goodbye?
Just thanks, everybody.
Appreciate you listening.
Thank you for listening once again, everybody. We do appreciate the support. And until next time, geek on, my friends.
We thank you for listening to the show. Comments, suggestions, and questions can be sent to email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net. You can follow us on Facebook @The Fellowship of the Geeks and on Twitter @FellowshipGeeks. Until next time,